Hello, everybody, and welcome to Third Wave Now. My name is Kate, and this is my little podcast. Hopefully, it's found its way safely onto YouTube. And firstly, thank you so much for taking the time to have a listen. So, what is Third Wave Now all about? Well, in essence, it's dedicated primarily to those who parent, those who are responsible for caring for children in any way, really, specifically within the arena of spiritual growth, evolution, and ultimately the journey to self-sovereignty. And I think now really is the time. So many of us have become aware on so many different levels of this whole ascension process. Quite a buzzword, I think, in places like YouTube. And this whole process, this upgrade taking place on very individual level, but also with the understanding, of course, that this is done for the collective, thanks to the quantum field, this being irrespective of time and space. So we heal backwards to our karmic ancestry, DNA, and we can also heal forwards. So yeah, we're all kind of learning some really cool stuff within the collective, and we'll talk a little bit about my own personal journey on this podcast, and perhaps more in depth in future episodes. But it does feel as if we have a gap in a couple of areas. And I think now really is the time to begin to open up discussion as to how do we parent through all of this. How do we manage our own process, as much as assisting our children, those under our care, with those. It's almost like a dual task, and it can feel like a really, really big ask sometimes. And that's why we've set this podcast up, so we can engage, we can discuss, we can come together, we can pull on resources, and we can assist each other further, because we are meant to be doing this together. This isn't an isolated individual approach, as much as at times many of us wish to be a hermit and hide from the world. I think right now we're all being called to come together, to bring our hearts together, a unified field, and really, really take care of ourselves, each other, and the planet. So given that then, perhaps now would be the time to discuss a little bit about my own individual experience, and hopefully some of you will be able to relate to this, and some of you will perhaps take comfort and realise it's not just you. I promise there's quite a few of us who have waded through our spiritual journey as well as attempting to parent. So I would say my awakening happened in 2009 to 2010, and I think it's fairly safe to say life went to shit in a series of unfortunate events. Was how it felt at the time. However, as the fantastic Caroline Emmis will tell you, co-creation will break you before it makes you. However, what we need to remember is co-creation isn't breaking you, it's breaking the false structures that have held you in a locked pattern. It's freeing you a little like the Tower card, I guess we could say, from tarot. So yes, my own spiritual awakening did not happen with a lot of peace, love, and understanding. All of my structures were taken away from me. I became very ill. I couldn't work. I had to have a lot of extensive surgery. My relationship fell apart. I eventually had to completely retrain in a different arena. And just to add in there, as if that wasn't enough, this whole process began when I was heavily pregnant. So yeah, there was quite a lot on my plate. And it was really hard. It was really difficult because I was trying to wade through all of this. I was getting in touch with my higher self. I had some incredibly profound experiences. I began to meditate. I could see the world for what it was. But I still had to parent. I was still responsible for regulating myself so I could regulate my child. I was responsible for providing boundaries and routines for the little person who looks to me and still does look to me to provide meaning and connection in his life. On a spiritual and emotional level, in as much as a physical sense, keeping my child well fed, dressed, watered, and cared for. So yeah, I really empathize and send lots of love out to those of you who have begun your journey back to yourself, back to your higher self, and are still caring for tiny people who are ultimately the future of this planet. Absolute hats off to you. I fully respect you. I fully feel your pain. I fully feel the heights of your bliss when things go amazingly right and you wonder at the marvel that you created. Absolute kudos. And as I say, now really is the time to open up the floor to discussion and give a voice as to how we're able to take what we've learnt, what we've processed, what we've purged, what we've cleared, our experience from doing so, our knowledge of all patterning, and how we can apply this to our parenting, and how we can encourage our little third wavers, and we'll talk about that term shortly, as to what they need the most is security, a connection, and self-sovereignty. This is what they need, and it's our job to make sure they become grounded in this. And we have purged for a reason. We haven't just purged for ourselves, as we mentioned back a few minutes ago. We've purged for everybody, and that means not passing that patterning on. And it may well be that your process began once your child was a certain age. Mine started with my child, so I'm pretty sure that there's some patterning there that I have passed on and we have to work on and clear. And it may well be the same with a lot of you out there too. And we'll come on to this in our next podcast. But just be aware that there's one key thing you have to do for yourself before you can even begin the process of making sure you are the guardian of your child's spiritual experience. Absolutely, we will come on to that shortly, and I would imagine the one thing I will suggest you are not doing. Purely because of the previous patterning. Lots of us were born into families that weren't like us. They didn't do what we do. They didn't think the way we think. They didn't get what we got. And our experience, although it was there for a reason, certainly to break the patterning, how else do you break karmic cycles of DNA other than being so different that you just are incapable of maintaining it without question? So that difference, although it served a purpose, was incredibly isolating for many of us. And we didn't have perhaps the nurture and support on this level that we needed. So I want you to keep that in mind. I want you to put that in the back of your think tank, because we're coming on to this in our next topic. It's crucially important. Anyway, back to today's podcast and why we are called Third Wave now. Well, I'm sure many of you will know already, but for those of you who don't, let me introduce you to a marvellous lady called Dolores Cannon, who is now no longer on the earth plane, but her legacy most definitely lives on in terms of the quantum hypnotherapy that's used worldwide these days to enable people to go back to former lives and heal, not only heal past events that have caused imprints on them, but also to physically heal themselves. So there's a whole movement attached to all the work Dolores did. But Dolores was married to a hypnotherapist, and curiosity got the better of her, and she became a hypnotherapist too. And it turned out she was really, really, really good at it. And she was able to put many people into an altered state. And she found a commonality, if you like, with a lot of people in terms of their age, their beliefs, their attitudes, and why they were here. And as you may have guessed, there are 3 waves. So the first wave, I'm kind of guessing, would now be in their kind of 60s to 70s to 80s. And they were souls who were probably a couple of generations past me. I'm 39 now, just to let you know. And they were the ones who had the hardest time here. They were the first volunteers, and I've hit them hard in terms of adjusting to life as a human. And there was lots of kind of depression and sadly suicide amongst these volunteers that just had such a hard time adjusting to the density and the violence of this planet. The second wave have fared a lot better, thankfully, and I do consider myself to be a second wave volunteer. There's no way I'm not, and that's not a boast, that's not a brag, it is what it is, and many of you will feel the same way. My suggestion is own that. That's yours to claim. So the third wave, the second wave rather, would now be in their early 30s to late 40s, possibly. And we're a wee bit more comfortable in our bodies. And I think the best way to describe us is we channel this. We channel the energy. And you will probably see a heck of a lot of second wavers here on YouTube now. I certainly subscribe to a couple who I know just absolute beacons. They're able to pick up on the energy, pick up on frequencies, help people, guide people, and support them through that. And I would thoroughly recommend subscribing to these people, because it will stop you feeling like you are going crazy, because the whole process is so different. You can feel on the edge of sanity at times, and that's perfectly normal, because everything you've been taught is pretty much being challenged. So I would thoroughly recommend subscribing to some of these second wavers who are able to channel the energy, and they're meant to be sharing. And I remember reading an article Dolores gave about second wavers, and she said, so many of these second wavers, they come to me and they say, what am I meant to be doing? I need to be doing something, I need a purpose. And the reality is, just being here is your purpose. You radiate and you magnify the energy. So stop doing what a lot of second wavers do, myself included, and locking yourself away like a hermit when you need to be among the people. It's quite ironic, actually, that we do lock ourselves away. It's understandable, because we're so sensitive to so much that's out there that it can feel really overwhelming. But the fact is, it's kind of where we need to be in perhaps a gentle and staggered approach we do need to be out there with people and contributing to the collective, and certainly for me, that's been my toughest challenge so far, I have to say. Really quite tough. But yeah, that's our second wavers. And I think many would perhaps include the indigo children, and the blue-ray children to a degree. These are two frequencies that, again, I can certainly identify with in terms of challenging, established norms, established rules. Why? Why though? I think it is a mantra for a lot of indigo children. So it's interesting to see how some of these concepts can line and come together. So that's our second wavers, and now we have our marvellous little third wavers. And I have to be honest with you guys, there is a part of me that's a tad jealous of the third wavers. And these are our new children. Some are actually teenagers, perhaps early 20s, perhaps, yeah. And they all have this inherent knowledge needed to exist on this planet after the dimensional shifts and the transformations that have been taking place. They have this more advanced DNA, etheric DNA, and their kind of greatest challenge that they face is being misunderstood because they're so different. And we're seeing cases of ADHD, autism spectrum, and for me, that whole thing, and again, we'll talk about this in more depth at another point. For me, these souls are coming in with these differences. I'm not calling them conditions. We will have conditions imposed upon us, but these are clear differences, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge to the authority of established education. It's a challenge to society. We have these beautiful souls here. How are you going to include them? What are you going to do? It's a wake-up call. Such a wake-up call. So these third wavers, and just to emphasize, a lot of them don't necessarily have what we would call ADHD or autism. A lot of them don't. My little one, for example, is full of energy, very, very frenetic, very switched on, and they have this kind of marvelous wisdom about them, but also an acceptance. They accept us. It's quite kind of them, isn't it? And they look at you with these eyes that have just, I don't know, they're very special little souls. So yeah, it was our job, in essence, to purge, to remove the patterning, to raise the frequency and the vibration of the planet, to do away with all this. So these souls could come in and really run with the paths that we have started to form for them. If we draw the analogy from psychotherapy, for example, and neuroplasticity, the brain can always develop new ways of thinking. If you think a thought enough, believe in that thought enough, it will change the way your brain fires up. It will change the way your brain works. It will change your experience. And collectively, if we see the planet as like a brain, we're the ones who have been stopping these previous negative, horrible weedial paths, and we're cultivating new ones. So we've begun the roads for these little third wavers to fire their impulses on, and by God, they will shake this place up. Already, you can see in these children that desire to ensure other children are looked after. We're seeing the acknowledgement that charity is needed, the acknowledgement of communal living, and the challenges that so many people, maybe in their sort of mid-20s to mid-30s, are facing in terms of buying their own home, for example, and getting a job. These third wavers are going to change that. They're really going to be ones to watch. I can't tell you how much I feel that. They're so in touch. So they deserve everything we can give them. And because they're so in touch, they're so aligned, that's kind of why I'm a bit jealous, because they came in fully realised. They weren't sat there crying on the bathroom floor till 4 o'clock in the morning. At times, I jest, and certainly when we've been doing our purging and growing, it's tough. So if I laugh at times that maybe seem inappropriate to you, it's not to cause offence. It's my higher self always brings the humour in. And trust me, that humour has taken me out to some seriously dark places in the past. So I thoroughly recommend you laugh in the face of adversity. I thoroughly recommend you do that. So anyway, that's a slight aside. But in essence, that's what our third wavers are. They are here to run with the baton we are handing on to them. Bless their souls. Which then calls into question again, as I think I keep saying in this podcast, how do we help them? How do we stay on our path? And I don't think there's any clear-cut answer at all. I think everybody's path is going to be unique and individual, but there will be some commonalities amongst us all. And so now is probably a good time to let you know what you can expect from this podcast. So I think we'll be fortnightly, so you don't get too bored. We may eventually progress to weekly, but we'll see. We will see. Certainly we'll be discussing my own experience and life lessons in terms of the spiritual process and yes, being the guardian of your child's spiritual experience, making sense of your journey and their journey thus far. We'll be discussing healing techniques, energetic modalities, and how we can use and teach them how we can tap into their natural energy, get them to feel the energy that they have in their body, in their nervous system, in the etheric field, really get them in touch with themselves within and without the physical body. Various spiritual ramblings, week dependent. And I think as well what's quite important perhaps is if we intersperse all of this with some mini workshops actually for the kids. So we will have some guided visualization, some breathing work for children. We'll have how to meditate, because you cannot expect a 5-year-old to sit there in the lotus position and switch off for half an hour. There are ways children need to tap into this process, and it is a process and it does need to be taught. But also importantly, we'll be tapping into visualization and imagination. Imagination is one of the most important assets your child has, and it's not to be dismissed, it's to be integrated, because it's their portal. It's their portal and it belongs to them, and we need to be mindful of this, and we need to guard this as much as anything, and also help them to control their imagination and their visualization so it doesn't become too overwhelming. So these are the kind of things we are going to be doing. It will mostly be myself. It may well be my little boy at times and certain guests. I would recommend perhaps listening to these types of podcasts if I haven't specifically said for your child, because I do drop the odd F-bomb and say things like shit, and I do apologise for that, but sometimes it's quite good to swear, and you probably agree as well, although you'd never tell your kids, right? I have to laugh. I did a guided meditation with Dr. Joe Dispenza in Portland yesterday. It was live. I think over 8,000 people tuned in. It was amazing. And before that he did a 2-hour talk, and he started to tell a story and stopped and laughed and said, no, I can't tell you that, I can't tell you that. And it was all about how he deals with moments of stress. And he eventually informed us all that his children never swear, but he does often, and he drops the F-bomb often. So I thought, well, I'm in good company, right? If Dr. D can swear, then so can I. But yeah, if it's something you're incredibly sensitive to, I wouldn't recommend listening to these types along with your children. But certainly, I will annotate when we have no swear words and you can listen to them. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you all. Hopefully, you've got a bit more of a feel as to what the channel's going to be about. Hopefully, it resonates with some of you, and hopefully, you can really see now is the time. I've been told umpteen time, get on, get that podcast done by Spirit, and so I have. I've done it. So yeah, next time, as we mentioned earlier, we will be focusing on what you need to do before you even consider being your child's spiritual guardian. Okay? And that does involve taking time for you, but we will discuss that further next time. So yeah, so much love to you all, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and do take care. Bye bye for now.